You remember the first time you learned that silence could be louder than screaming. You were small, maybe 7, maybe 10. You said something true, something that mattered to you, and your mother went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes before comfort. The kind that sinks into the room like fog. Heavy, cold, unreadable. And in that moment, you learned something your brain would never forget. Your voice was dangerous. Not because you were loud, not because you were wrong, but because speaking made the person you needed most disappear behind a wall you could not climb. This is not about mothers who yell. This is about mothers who vanish. This is about the children who learn to swallow their words to keep the love from evaporating. And if you are that child now grown, now walking through the world with a throat that tightens every time you need to say something real, this is the explanation you have been searching for. Let me describe you. You are the person who rehearses conversations in your head for days before having them. You write texts and delete them 17 times. You feel guilty for needing things. You apologize for taking up space. You have been told you are articulate, intelligent, capable, but when it comes time to speak up for yourself, your words dissolve like sugar in water. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are responding exactly the way a child responds when their primary attachment figure uses silence as a form of control. Your silence is not a personality trait. It is a survival pattern. And it started the day you realized that your mother's love was conditional on your ability to stay small, quiet, and emotionally invisible. The psychological architecture of maternal silence here is what happened in your brain. When you were young, your nervous system had one job: keep you safe. And safety, for a child, is not about food or shelter. It is about proximity to the caregiver. A child will sacrifice their own needs, their own truth, their own voice, if it means keeping the bond intact. Your mother did not have to hit you. She did not have to scream. She simply had to withdraw. And withdrawal, to a child's brain, feels like death. Neuroscience calls this the attachment system. When a mother goes silent, when she turns away emotionally, when she withholds eye contact, warmth, or acknowledgement, the child's brain interprets this as abandonment. The amygdala fires. Cortisol floods the system. The child experiences what researchers call social pain, which activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. In other words, your mother's silence hurt you the same way a wound would. And because you could not escape, because you were dependent on her for survival, your brain did the only thing it could. It adapted. It learned that speaking equals suffering. So you stopped. Not all at once, but slowly, sentence by sentence, feeling by feeling, until one day, you woke up and realized you no longer knew how to say what you needed. You no longer trusted your own voice. You no longer believed that what you felt mattered enough to be spoken. You became fluent in silence. The origin. Why some mothers choose silence. Before we go further, we need to understand why. Not to excuse, not to justify, but to see the pattern clearly. Your mother's silence was not about you. It was about her. Most mothers who use silence as a tool learned it themselves. They grew up in homes where emotions were dangerous, where vulnerability was punished, where love was transactional and conditional. They were raised by parents who could not hold space for feelings, so they never learned how to hold space for yours. They inherited emotional numbness and passed it down like a family heirloom. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, reject, and push into the dark. For many mothers, anger is in the shadow, sadness is in the shadow, fear is in the shadow. And when a child expresses those emotions, the mother does not see the child. She sees her own buried pain reflected back at her. So she shuts down. She goes silent. She withdraws, not because you did something wrong, but because your aliveness reminds her of everything she had to kill inside herself to survive. This is the intergenerational wound, the cycle of emotional abandonment that moves through families like a virus, invisible but devastating. And you, as the child, bore the weight of it. The mask you built, let me tell you what you became. You became the quiet one, the easy child, the one who never caused problems, the one who learned to read the room before you entered it, the one who could sense a shift in energy from across the house. You developed what psychologists call hypervigilance, a state of constant monitoring. You learned to track your mother's moods like a meteorologist tracking storms. You became fluent in micro-expressions, tone shifts, body language. You learned to predict when silence was coming so you could adjust your behavior before it arrived. This is not a skill. This is a trauma response. And the cost of it was this: you disappeared. Not physically, but emotionally. You buried your needs so deep you forgot they existed. You learned to be whatever the room needed you to be. You became a mirror, reflecting back what others wanted, because showing your true self had proven too risky. You traded authenticity for safety. You traded your voice for proximity. And the tragedy is this: the safety was an illusion. Because no matter how quiet you became, no matter how small you made yourself, your mother's silence was never really about you. It was always about her inability to be present, her inability to feel, her inability to see you as separate from her own unhealed wounds. You could not have fixed it by being quieter. You could not have earned her presence by disappearing more. The game was rigged from the start. The stages of voice loss. This did not happen overnight. It happened in stages. Stage 1, the testing phase. You were young. You spoke freely. You expressed needs, feelings, curiosities. You were loud, messy, alive. And then, one day, your mother went silent. Maybe you asked for something. Maybe you cried. Maybe you disagreed. And she turned away. You did not understand it yet. You just felt the absence, the cold, the distance. So you tested it. You spoke again. You reached out again. And again, she withdrew. This is when your brain began to form the association. Voice equals loss. Stage 2. The bargaining phase. You started adjusting. You learned to say things differently, softer, smaller. You learned to ask for less, to need less. You became strategic with your words, carefully selecting only the safest, most neutral things to say. You were negotiating for love, and sometimes it worked. When you were quiet, when you were compliant, when you performed the version of yourself she could tolerate, she returned. She smiled. She was present. This taught you that love was not unconditional. It was a reward for silence. Stage 3, the shutdown phase. Eventually, you stopped testing. You stopped bargaining. You stopped speaking altogether, at least about anything real. You learned to say fine when you were not fine. You learned to say nothing when you needed everything. You learned to smile when you were dying inside. You became a ghost in your own life. And the most insidious part, you started to believe this was who you really were, that you were naturally quiet, naturally passive, naturally someone who did not need much. You forgot that silence was a strategy, not a personality. Ever wondered what happens when childhood emotional neglect follows you into adulthood? It's like an invisible weight, shaping how you see the world, how you interact with others, and even how you feel about yourself. Let's talk about the 10 most common consequences and how to start healing. First, you might struggle with a persistent feeling of emptiness. It's not sadness, not exactly depression, but a void, a sense that something fundamental is missing from your life. This happens because your emotional needs weren't validated as a child, leaving you feeling hollow inside. Second, you might develop a deep-seated fear of being dependent on anyone. You learned early on that relying on others for emotional support was pointless or even painful. So, as an adult, you become fiercely independent, refusing help and believing you can handle everything alone. This can make it incredibly hard to build truly intimate relationships. Third, you probably have a poor understanding of your own emotions. If your feelings were ignored or dismissed in childhood, you never learned to identify, name, or manage them. You might know you feel bad, but you can't pinpoint if it's anger, sadness, or disappointment. This lack of emotional clarity can be incredibly frustrating. Fourth, you might feel a profound sense of being flawed or different from everyone else. You look around and see people connecting, sharing, and expressing themselves, and you feel like an outsider looking in. This often comes with the harsh inner critic that constantly tells you you're not good enough. Fifth is a difficulty with self-care and self-compassion. Treating yourself with kindness might feel unnatural or even selfish. Since you weren't shown that your needs mattered, you internalize the belief that they don't. This can lead to neglecting your own well-being, both physically and emotionally. Sixth, you may find yourself drawn to emotionally unavailable partners or friends. This is often an unconscious attempt to replicate the emotional dynamics of your childhood. It feels familiar, even if it's painful. You might keep choosing people who can't give you the emotional connection you crave, reinforcing the old belief that your needs won't be met. Seventh, there's often a strong tendency toward perfectionism. You might believe that if you can just be perfect, the perfect employee, the perfect friend, the perfect partner, you will finally be worthy of love and acceptance. This creates immense pressure and a constant fear of failure. Eighth, you might struggle with setting boundaries. Saying no can feel impossible because you're afraid of disappointing others or being rejected. You learn that your needs came second, so you continue to put everyone else's needs before your own, often leading to burnout and resentment. Ninth, you may experience a sense of emotional numbness. To survive a childhood where your feelings were too overwhelming or unwelcome, you might have learned to shut them down completely. As an adult, this can make it hard to feel joy, excitement, or even love, leaving life feeling flat and gray. And finally, the 10th consequence is a deep-seated loneliness. Even when you're surrounded by people, you can be in a crowded room and feel completely alone because you're missing that deep, authentic emotional connection that was absent in your early life. Recognizing these patterns is the first, powerful step toward healing. It's not about blaming anyone, it's about understanding. The next step is learning to give yourself what you never received. Start by simply noticing your feelings without judgment. Get curious about them. Practice small acts of self-care. And most importantly, know that you are not alone in this. If these feelings are overwhelming, reaching out to a therapist or a mental health professional can be a life-changing decision. They can provide you with the tools and support to navigate this journey. Healing is possible, and you deserve to feel whole, connected, and emotionally alive. Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content on understanding ourselves better. See you next time.